She thought she was playing it smart. No courtroom battles, no drawn-out legal fees, just a peaceful mediation where both sides could walk away with what they needed. That's what they'd promised her. What she didn't know was that one overlooked detail, one small, quiet mistake, would cost her everything she had worked for. Her retirement, gone. Her security, shaken. And the most painful part, it all happened in a room where she believed she was safe. Every year, thousands of women go into divorce mediation hoping for fairness, closure, and peace. But when you're tired, emotionally drained, and eager to move on, it's easy to agree to something that sounds reasonable without realizing how much it'll cost you later. Most don't realize until it's too late that mediation isn't protection, it's negotiation. And without the right awareness, the very process meant to shield you can quietly take everything you've built. In this video, we're going to break down the hidden mistake that cost one woman her retirement, and the 6 other traps that quietly sabotage women during mediation when they're vulnerable, exhausted, or simply trying to keep things civil. If you're heading into divorce or know someone who is, you need to hear this, because protecting your future means knowing where things go wrong before it happens to you. Let's get started. She walked into mediation believing everything was already out on the table. The house, the bank accounts, even the car titles. She thought it was all accounted for. But what she didn't realize was that skipping a full financial inventory would be the first silent mistake that unraveled everything. See, when emotions are running high and you just want it over with, it's easy to assume what's his is his and what's yours is yours. But that's not how marital assets work, especially when it comes to retirement accounts. In her case, there was a forgotten $401k from a job he had over a decade ago. Small, he said. Not worth arguing about. And in the moment she let it go, what she didn't know was that account had grown, compounded over time into 6 figures. She never saw a penny of it, and because it wasn't disclosed on the financial statement and she didn't demand a full asset trace, she waived her right to it without even knowing. This happens more often than you'd think. Old pensions, stock options, restricted shares, crypto wallets, even life insurance with cash value, all can be considered part of the marital estate. But unless you do a full line-by-line inventory of every financial asset, you don't know what you're walking away from until it's already gone. And don't assume your spouse will volunteer the information. Mediation isn't about confession, it's about negotiation. And if you're too emotionally drained to dig deep or too trusting to ask questions, you might miss the very things that could fund your future. Her mistake wasn't trusting him, it was trusting the process without verifying the numbers. Because once the ink dries on that agreement, it's final. No second chances, no do-overs. And for her, the cost wasn't just the account, it was the stability she thought she had for the next 20 years. But as you'll see next, missing a retirement account is only the beginning. The way it's divided or not can be just as devastating. She thought she was being fair. He had worked for most of the marriage while she stayed home to raise the kids, take care of the house, and support his career behind the scenes. So when the topic of retirement came up during mediation, she felt uncomfortable asking for too much. It's his pension, she told herself. He earned it. And just like that, she agreed to take less than half, thinking she was doing the right thing. But that single decision would haunt her for the rest of her life. What she didn't realize is that retirement isn't a reward for past work. It's a shared asset built during the marriage. Whether it's a pension, a 401k, or any other long-term savings account, the law often views it as marital property. That means she had a legal right to half of the amount accumulated during the years they were together. Not asking for that full share didn't make her gracious. It made her financially vulnerable. Here's the part most women aren't told. Even if the retirement account is in his name, that doesn't mean it's his alone. Contributions made during the marriage are typically split regardless of who made the paycheck deposits. And when you're older, especially nearing retirement age, there's less time to rebuild what you give up. A 40-year-old might recover, a 62-year-old, much harder. In her case, she walked away with a small cash buyout, enough to cover a year or 2 of bills, while he kept the monthly pension that would pay out for the rest of his life. 10 years later, she was struggling to afford rent while he was enjoying retirement trips and a steady income. And there was nothing she could do about it. The agreement was signed, final, irrevocable. So if you're ever told during mediation that taking less will speed things up or that fighting for more just makes it ugly, ask yourself this: who really benefits from you settling for less? Because being civil shouldn't come at the cost of your future. And next, you'll see how even the house, the place you feel safest, can become a trap if you're not careful. She thought keeping the house would give her stability. It was where her kids grew up, where she had poured years of memories and meaning into every wall and corner. So when he offered to let her keep it in exchange for walking away from his retirement account, she said yes without hesitation. It felt like a win, like she was holding onto something solid. But what she didn't realize is that choosing the house over liquid assets would end up draining her dry. Mistake? She didn't look at the long-term cost of owning that house alone. The taxes, maintenance, repairs, insurance, it all added up faster than she expected. Within a year, the roof needed replacing. Then the water heater failed. She had to dip into her savings just to keep the place livable. Meanwhile, he had downsized to a condo, pocketed his equity, and was building wealth while she was struggling to keep the lights on. And here's the part no one warned her about. The house might have felt like security, but it wasn't income. Retirement accounts pay you month after month. A house? It costs you, unless you sell it. But by then, she was emotionally attached and financially stuck. Selling meant giving up the very thing she fought for. And after all the money she had poured into it, the profit was smaller than she'd imagined. Plus, any capital gains hit harder when you're on your own and unprepared. She thought she was playing it safe by keeping the family home, but in reality, she had trapped herself into an asset-heavy, cash-poor future. That's the danger so many women walk into when they choose emotional comfort over financial strategy. The truth is, financial freedom doesn't always look like the life you had. It looks like the life you can afford to sustain. And if you think giving up the house is the hardest trade-off you'll face, just wait until you see what happens when you don't fully understand the hidden tax burdens in your agreement. That's what we'll uncover next. She didn't even blink when he offered her a lump sum. It sounded generous. One large payment now instead of waiting years for monthly checks. Take the cash, her mediator said. It's clean, simple, and you'll have full control. What no one explained to her was the tax trap hiding in that check. And by the time she figured it out, the damage was already done. Here's what really happened. The money she received came from his retirement account, an account that hadn't been taxed yet. But instead of splitting it through a qualified domestic relations order, QDRO, which would have allowed her to roll it into her own retirement account tax-free, they framed it as a buyout. So when she deposited that check, it counted as income, and suddenly she owed thousands in taxes, money she hadn't budgeted for, money she didn't even know she'd be responsible for. She thought she was getting $100,000, 0 cents. After taxes, it was closer to $65,000, 0 cents. And because she used it to pay bills and fix up the house, she couldn't even claim retirement savings deductions. The money disappeared far quicker than she imagined. Meanwhile, he walked away with his pension intact and continued building tax-deferred wealth. The worst part, it was avoidable. A properly executed quadro would have protected her from the tax hit, but no one explained that option. Her mediator wasn't a financial expert, and she didn't hire a divorce functional CPA. So when it came time to make decisions, she was operating on trust and emotion, not informed strategy. That's the danger of mediation without education. It can feel cooperative on the surface, but leave you blind to the long-term consequences. And if you think that's the only financial surprise that can sneak up on you, wait until you see how survivor benefits or the lack of them can change everything overnight. Let's talk about that next. She assumed she'd be fine. After all, she was married for over 20 years. He had a solid pension, Social Security, everything looked stable on paper. But what she didn't realize during mediation was that if she didn't explicitly negotiate for survivor benefits, she might get nothing after he dies. And that's exactly what happened. When they split, he agreed to give her a portion of his monthly pension, but only while he was alive. There was no conversation about what would happen if he passed first. No one explained that pensions don't automatically continue to a former spouse. Without a survivor benefit clause written into the agreement, those payments stop the day he dies. And that's exactly what blindsided her. A few years after the divorce, he unexpectedly passed away. She thought the payments would continue. Instead, the checks stopped immediately. No warning, no recourse, just silence. And with it, a major chunk of her income vanished overnight. She had built her post-divorce budget around that money, used it to pay her mortgage, her groceries, her health insurance. Now it was gone, and she had no legal way to get it back. It felt like betrayal, but it wasn't malicious. It was just a detail, an overlooked clause that cost her thousands and left her scrambling in the years when she needed stability the most. Though here's the painful truth. Survivor benefits aren't automatic. You have to ask for them. You have to spell it out in the agreement. And sometimes you even have to accept a lower monthly amount during his lifetime just to secure them. But no one told her that. Not the mediator, not her friends, not even her lawyer, who assumed she knew. If you're negotiating a divorce and your spouse has a pension, stop everything until you understand exactly what happens when they die. Because when that day comes, and it will, you don't want to be holding a settlement that forgot to plan for life after loss. And if you think this was the last unexpected blow she faced, just wait. Because the most expensive mistake of all wasn't about money. It was about trust. Let's get into that next. She wanted to believe the best, that despite everything, they could still be civil, still be fair. And when he said, let's not involve lawyers too much, we can work this out ourselves, it sounded reasonable, kind, even mature. So she agreed to keep things simple. What she didn't realize was that trusting his version of fairness would cost her more than any courtroom ever could. They sat across the table, splitting assets with words like amicable and cooperative. He assured her he wasn't hiding anything. He showed her the basics. Bank accounts, a few investments, the house. It all seemed transparent. But what he didn't show her, and what she didn't think to ask about, were the deferred assets, the stock options, the bonuses, the private investments tied to his business ventures, because those weren't technically on paper yet, and without full legal discovery, she never even knew they existed. By the time she found out, years later, it was too late. He had built back his wealth quickly. She, on the other hand, was stretching every dollar from her half of the house sale and modest retirement split. And when she asked her lawyer if anything could be done, she was met with silence. No discovery, no documentation, no legal leverage. And then she had signed the agreement willingly. What made it worse was how easily it could have been prevented. A simple request for full financial disclosure, a forensic accountant, even a second opinion before signing. But she didn't push. She didn't want to create conflict. She wanted peace. What she got was a lopsided settlement disguised as cooperation. The hard lesson? Mediation is only as honest as the people in the room. Without pressure, without consequences, some people will share only what they're forced to. And if you walk in tired, hopeful, and unprotected, you're the one who pays the price. So if you're thinking about keeping it peaceful, ask yourself this. Are you walking in with clarity or just hope? Because peace without protection isn't peace. It's quiet surrender. And there's one last mistake she made that sealed the deal. It didn't involve numbers or clauses or paperwork. It was something far simpler, but far more devastating. Let's talk about that in the final section. She thought she was being reasonable, cooperative, even wise. But the truth is, being the reasonable one cost her more than any fight ever would have. Her retirement was the price of peace. And she's not alone. Every year, countless women walk into mediation hoping for fairness, believing that if they don't rock the boat, things will turn out okay. But mediation isn't built on hope. It's built on leverage, information, and clarity. And without those, even the calmest conversation can leave you with nothing. But let's be clear, what cost her her future wasn't a lack of intelligence, it was exhaustion, it was misplaced trust, it was choosing ease over strategy because she was tired of hurting. That's what makes mediation so dangerous. It feels safe, it looks simple, but underneath it can quietly strip away everything you've worked for if you're not paying attention. Here's a truth most don't want to say out loud. Divorce is not just emotional, it's financial warfare disguised as paperwork. And if you walk into mediation thinking it's just about being fair, you're already at a disadvantage. Protecting yourself doesn't make you difficult. Asking questions doesn't make you unkind. And saying, I need to think before I sign doesn't make you dramatic, it makes you smart. So if you're approaching divorce, especially mediation, don't just hope for fairness. Build it, demand transparency, get advice, double check the numbers, take your time, because once the ink is dry, there's no going back. Her mistake doesn't have to be yours. Learn from it, guard your future, and remember, sometimes the quietest decisions leave the loudest echoes.